Hello there, my name is Michael Maynard and welcome back to Gorilla Picking. Now, we're going to do something a little bit different today, folks, and that's because I had a really interesting comment on a video I did a week or two ago that said they were really happy to see the video. It was the one on the Swedish sort of Assa twin light thing, safety deposit lock, and this comment was, okay, well look, Michael, it's good to see you picking this sort of stuff because there aren't that many complex high security locks being picked on YouTube anymore. And I sort of had to think about that, and I thought, well shit, actually that might be right. There are a few videos every now and again about complex stuff that guys have done for belt ranking and that sort of stuff, but in the main, the videos on YouTube tend to be a little bit mundane these days. You know, somebody picks a 5-pin lock or somebody picks a American 1100, you know, that sort of thing. And I thought, well, hell, okay, maybe guys want to see really interesting locks picked and discussed. So I thought, without further ado, we might just go absolutely nuts and do a really, really hard one. So what I've got here today is an Assa twin Combi, and this is a lock that we've all heard of, I'm sure. It's an aspirational lock for a lot of people. It's a lock that a lot of people want to be able to pick, and for very many people it's just out of their reach. You know, it's just too complex. And I thought, well, what the hell, why don't we break it down, talk about how to open this thing, talk about what's in it, and maybe we can make picking this unicorn lock, this aspirational lock, a little bit more accessible. So what I'm going to do, I've already picked this lock, and the picking will be the second half of this video. There is a separate silent picking video that I've done elsewhere as well. Okay, so that's for belt ranking purposes. So I might just speed through a couple of things in this video, but I thought what we do first of all is talk about the lock in a great deal of detail, how to pick it, and then the second part will be going on to pick the thing and prove that I did it. So what is the Assa twin Combi? Well, it is an Assa twin that has been around since 1991. Now, what you need to know about that is that the actual very first Assa twin was designed in 1980, if you can believe that. The original Assa twin is now 44 years old, believe it or not. And it was a fantastic lock in its day. It had 6 pins at the top, and then it had a sidebar which had 5 sliders. Now, here's what you got to know about that, folks. The keyways on these locks have changed a bit over the years, but the actual plug, so the brass bit of metal that's made into the plug, has stayed absolutely unchanged for 44 years. And they've made the Assa twin, they made the twin Combi in 1991, there's the Assa V10, there's the Maximum, there's the Exclusive, there's the Twin Pro, Christ knows how many of these things, right up until the Assa DP 4400, which you might have seen me pick about a month ago, which probably is the most complex pin tumbler and sidebar lock on the market today. It's a phenomenal lock. But the point is, they've used the same bit of brass for all those different lock types for 44 years. So what Assa did was did the basics very, very well once, and then have been making the same core, the same Bible. So all the Bibles have got 6 chambers at the top and a sidebar groove at the side there like that, and the same pins, so the top pins have all been the same for the last 44 years. So imagine the money that they've made out of this one good idea. It's just phenomenal. And what they've changed with each iteration of this lock is the sidebar. So they have used the original 6000 series sidebar was quite simple. This one for the twin Combi is a lot more complex. The one for the most recent lot, the 4400, is phenomenally complex. So what they've done is jammed 10 pins into these slots here that were originally designed for 5. So they've made it go the extra distance, but it's still the same core, you know. So they've changed the sidebar, they've changed the keyway obviously over the years, but kept everything else the same. Okay, so with that said, what is it that's special about the twin combi? Well, as you may or may not know, the thing about the twin combi is that the sidebar sliders not only need to get raised a certain amount, but they also need to be rotated a little bit, in fact, like Medico pins. So it's not enough to get them to the right height, you've got to get them to the right angle as well. And there are, well, now this is an interesting point. It was originally thought that there were simply 6 positions. So there was a top and a bottom, and then a fore, a medium, and an aft. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But it turns out that there's actually a 7th position for these sidebar sliders to be in as well. So you've got 1, 2, 3 down the bottom, 4, 5, 6 up the top, and 7, one extra higher one. So you've got to get those things right, and of course that is very much more difficult, very much harder than just raising a slider to one particular height. So getting it to the right height and getting it on the right angle is massively more difficult. Now, in addition to that, if that wasn't enough, I'm just going to slide this down here so that I can show you the pinning. The sidebar sliders do not have false gates as such. What they do in fact have though is, if this ever focuses, little, there we go, little grooves. So you can see here that there's no mastering on this, so there is just one true gate, if you like. But you can also see, I hope anyway, that there are ridges along here. There's grooves that run vertically up the pin. And so what that means is that once you've lifted this a bit and those grooves jam into place on the sidebar, it's very hard to then take the tension off enough to rotate that round without dropping everything. So not only have you got to get it to the right height, and you've got to get it to the right orientation, fore, aft, or in the middle, but as well as that, in doing that, you've got to get in and out of these little grooves as well. So it makes picking that sidebar bloody difficult, in all honesty. Here is the sidebar, and here's how everything fits together. The sidebar itself is actually pretty simple, so if you have a look at that, and again if I try and zoom in a little bit and still get this thing to focus, if I can get the focus right, yeah, there we go, good enough. You'll see that those gates there have got a tiny wee serration on the edge of them. I'm not sure whether the resolution of this camera is good enough to show it, but on each side of these little bumps here, there is a little wee serration, and you know, guess what? I mean, that is what snicks into the grooves on these side pins. So here, for example, is the side pin fitting into its wee slot. Pretty self-explanatory, you know. But here's the groove catching on one of those little serrations. That ain't going anywhere unless you are very, very careful. Okay, all right. What else is there to talk about as far as the pinning goes? Well, of course, we need to talk about those top pins. So there are a couple of variants of these. I believe that there are twin combis out there with gins in them. I've never seen that. So gin bottle pins, we all know what those look like, but most of them have these standard Assa or Ruco, same thing, barrel spools. Here is our barrel spool. That's pretty self-explanatory. You guys have all seen those. And the way that these provide pick resistance is that there are serrations in the core. There's countermilling there in the core. Again, every single Assa twin has had one of those for the last 44 years. And so what happens obviously is the lip of the gin gets caught in the countermilling, and once it's in there and stuck, it's pretty difficult to get it back out of there. It's doable, all right. I mean, you know, you can do it. But you do need to be good with the tension control, and you do need to be able to figure out the difference between a pin that's caught in countermilling and of course a pin that's set, because if you push a pin that's set too far, of course you are going to overset the lock. So that is the fundamentals of how this thing works. Now I thought what we'd do next is talk about the equipment that you need to be able to pick this thing. And I like picking these with the thickest picks I possibly can. And if you guys have seen me, well, if, not just picking these things, okay, but if you've seen me picking any lock really, you'll know that I use quite heavy tension compared to a lot of other good pickers, and I like big solid picks. I like big solid picks because they give you really, really good feedback. So what you do for picking a lock like this, you would pick the strongest pick that you can find that will still get into the keyway that you are working with. Now, very many of the Assa twin keyways, and this is one of them, you can get at the very least an 18th thou pick in there. I'll talk about this particular one in a second. And in fact, even a 23 or a 25 thou. Now, this is my short hook made for me by Tiffany. This is absolutely my favourite pick in the world. It goes into every lock, first time, every time. It is modelled on a Tron, although Tiffany has evolved the shape since the Tron was first designed 10 or 15 years ago. And it operates basically as a short hook. Now, I very much like this pick because it gives really good control and, like I said, really good feedback. But it is not quite steep enough for picking some of the higher set pins in here. And also, you get different feedback from a steeper hook as well. Now, I do need to explain that, okay? So, for a start, if you've got difficult bitting, of course, a short hook won't be enough. There are going to be some pins at the back of the lock that you need a steeper hook for. Okay, all right. This Peterson number 5 in 18 thousandths is phenomenally good for that. I know Peterson picks don't get a lot of love from a lot of people. I think those people are wrong. This hook is absolutely fantastic. It gives me almost as much feedback as my bespoke one from Tiffany. Not quite, but it's almost as good. However, what it does is it gives you better leverage on some pins, and it is exactly the same principle as a crowbar. If you've got a crowbar with a sort of a shallow hook, you get to get a bit of leverage on things, but not, you know, too much. On the other hand, if you've got a crowbar with a lever that looks like that, then of course you're going to get much more force. And one of the things that I personally find with setting the top pins on these things is that sometimes you do need quite a lot of force to get them in and out of the countermilling. So even though I'm able to pick this particular lock, if I'm careful, the bitting is just such that I can actually get away with this pick for the whole thing. Even though I could do that, I need a bit of force to set some of those pins, and so swapping to this steeper hook is a very, very good idea. And when you see me picking this thing, you'll actually see me swapping between these two. You'd think that I would pick everything that I could with the short hook, then put it aside and go pick stuff with the steeper hook. That ain't how it works, guys, all right? So what I'd suggest is that you figure out what picks, plural, you are going to use for the top pins, and choose two that you get really good at. Okay, now I spoke just briefly there about making sure that we could definitely get the bitting with any given hook. And what I would suggest that you do, if you're learning how to pick one of these things, you want to be absolutely certain that you can pick whatever the lock is without oversetting something. So you're going to pull these locks apart. When you're learning how to pick them, you're going to pull them apart a million times. And the first time you do that, what you should do is you should stick it in this thing from the Huck kit. We all know what this is, right? We've all got one of those. And we should check that you can pick the lock. Now, I'm not going to waste time and stick every single one of the pins back in here, excuse me, but just to show you what I mean, I'm just going to put pins 1 and 6 in there, just for the sake of demonstration and argument. Here going in so that you can see that we've got the correct pins in there. Now I want to know that I can set all of those pins with this same hook. So I get in there and I can just and no more get that lever up high enough with my short hook. And if I go back down to the back of the lock on number 6, you can see that I can get that one to the shear line fairly easily as well. And I won't bother putting the other pins in there, guys, because it's the same principle. But you want to go through and make sure that whichever hooks you're choosing, you can absolutely get these things set without oversetting something and just going round and round and round and round in circles. So that's the hook side of things. Now the next thing I want to talk about is tension, and there are a couple of ways of doing this. You may have heard of float picking. Now if you are interested in float picking, I am not the guy to teach you. Go look at somebody else's video. There are a few good videos on there by some LPU black belt guys who really know what they're doing. I don't do that, okay? Messing around with two tension tools is just not for me. So what I do, I have got a bent piece of piano wire here. So this is, and just let me measure it so I'm saying the right thing, 1.97, whatever that is in inches, piano wire that I have bent to 90 degrees and then filed down for this specific keyway so that it is a really tight fit. You want to be able to control this keyway absolutely 100%, no messing about, okay? So that fits in there snugly. I can let that go, and that is hanging in there. That's never coming out until I physically pull it back out again. Now what does that do? That lets me get counter rotation with this thing without dropping pins. I mean, I'm going to drop a few on us, obviously, but because there's no slop there, I can really, really, really accurately control how much tension I have on there. When you see me picking, I actually have a lot. Like I said, I'm a guy who picks with a lot of tension. A lot of black belts don't do that. I do. So you're going to see me pick with a lot of tension in whichever direction I'm going. But when I am getting top pins in and out of countermilling, and when I'm getting sliders in and out of false gates or grooves in this case, there's no false gates on these things obviously, but when I'm getting when I'm working on delicate stuff with sliders, I will be counter rotating a fraction of a degree with this thing, and if you've got slop in there, it just ain't going to work. So that's the tension tool I use. You can file down these things, like I said, so that's piano wire that you get from hobby shops. The other thing that I personally like to use is bicycle spokes. So I am a cycling guy. I've ridden push bikes all my life, and so I've got wrecked wheel sets and stuff lying around everywhere. Bicycle spokes make fantastic tension tools. This particular one that's sitting around is 1.9 mils in diameter, so yeah, look, basically exactly the same as the piano wire. Cheap, readily available, slightly softer and bendier than the piano wire. So the piano wire is very hard, it's quite hard to bend, and it's a little bit hard to file, and it's a little bit hard on the keyway. So you'll see that the keyway here is just a little bit chewed up here at the top. That's because I've been getting in there with the piano wire, which is harder than the brass that thing's made of. So there's a little bit of deformation there. The bicycle spokes don't do that so much. Okay, so we've talked about top pins, we've talked about the tension. The only thing we've got to do now is talk about the tool that we are using for the sidebar sliders. And again, I'm going a little bit against the grain here. So if you look at most of the Assa twin combi picking videos from the last few years, guys have been using the multi-pick number 10. The multi-pick number 10 is the tiny one. So you guys that have got the multi-pick kit, okay, this thing here, you'll know that most of the picks in there are a certain, the same diameter and the same size flag. The number 10 is the little tiny one that has the shaft only 0.8488 whatever of a mil in diameter. Now, here is the thing, folks. If you have got easy bitting of the sidebar, this will work, okay? And I don't want to say anything against the guys that have used the number 10 multi-pick, because it does work, all right? However, there is a problem. If you have got two, let me just back out here a little bit. If you have got two sidebar sliders that are going to come together on that sort of angle, then you're going to end up with not enough room in the middle here to get your pick in. Now, this just happens to be one such lock, and what I ended up doing was making my own pick, which I really like this actually. It's turned out really good. It started out as being something out of this Goso set. So you know how with the Goso you get a ton of different useless bloody things that you can never pick any locks with. They're just a bunch of rubbish. And a handle. So what I did was I took one of those picks and I narrowed it down to some very specific dimensions, which I'm now going to give you. So if you need to know this, folks, then pause the video as we go. The shaft on this thing is oval, and it's about 0.8 of a mil in diameter, somewhere between 0.8 and 0.9, something like that. Now, the length of the flag is absolutely crucial. This one is 2.4, near enough. So 2.38 is roughly what I'm measuring it as there. That's basically one stroke of the file, right? And then even more crucial is the fore and aft dimension of this thing. And the dimension on this is about 0.8 from memory. Yeah, 0.81. Those numbers are really, really important. So particularly that 0.81 dimension, that lets you get in between these little holes here and manipulate those sliders accurately. The other thing that I did was chamfered and beveled the edges quite a lot. So the edges on this are not square. What I've done is angled them off so that I can get in there and slide under set pins. I should tell you the thickness of it as well, I guess. So 0.06 0.6, basically 0.62 is what I'm getting. So again, those dimensions, it is about 2.4 end to end. The width of it, the crucial number as far as I'm concerned, was about 0.8, and the thickness is about 0.6 of a mil, with a whole lot of chamfering there and a whole lot of polishing so that it can slide under those sidebar nubbins. Right, okay, I think we have talked about almost everything you need to know, and we're at 25 minutes, if you can believe that. I have ranted about this thing for 25 minutes. What I am going to do now is stop this video, edit it, and well, obviously you've figured that out, right? I'm going to stop this, I'm going to edit it, and then I'm going to splice the picking video on the end of this, and we will talk about what I'm doing as I pick it. All right, let's go, guys. Okay folks, well, I'm trying something new here, so I'm trying a bit of a voiceover. It's either going to work or it's not, so I guess this is where we find out whether I can do voiceovers and whether I can pick locks. So I've shown you that the lock works and that we've got a key. We have now got some tension on there. We're going anti-clockwise because that's just the most convenient way for this lock. It just so happens that the top pins bind first, going anti-clockwise. And now I'm going through with my short hook. Now at this stage, nothing, maybe you just heard a click there. Nothing was really in countermilling for a start there, okay, so, there we go, decent clicks. Yeah, so for the first little while, you're just raising those pins, but you're not getting in and out of countermilling. Once you've got a little click and a little turn, then you are actually picking the lock and you're in countermilling and, you know, picking properly, basically. So I'm going through with my tippany hook. I generally go from back to front, so I start at 6 and work my way forward. I've got pretty much everything I can, I think, with that short hook. So I am now swapping over to the steeper hook, the Peterson number 5 in 18 thou, and going through. I will get at least 1 or 2 more clicks here. Not so much because there's a bitting issue with this lock, but because I get more leverage, and you do definitely need a bit of leverage, a bit of pick pressure basically, to get some of those pins set. Alright, still going from back to front. We're coming forward slowly but surely, and I think at this point, no more binders, time to start having a look at the sidebar. So I'm going in there with my modified sidebar hook, flag, whatever we're going to call it. And I'm going really delicately here. I'm just trying to feel what's going on. A lot of these pins are not binding, but something clearly down the back is, and you can see me backing off the tension there. Going to get a big click at some stage here, I think. You saw my pick getting a bit stuck on the way back out. Feeling at the front of the lock, being pretty careful. Doesn't look like there's much binding at all here now, so swapping back to the top pins. You'll see me doing this over and over and over again, because what happens here is you get a click from an element, whether it's on the top or the bottom, and in doing so you'll actually drop a whole lot of other stuff. So if you're working on the sidebar, you might drop a couple of sidebar pins, getting one. If you're working on the top, then you might counter rotate a tiny bit to get out of some countermilling, and of course you then go and drop something on the sidebar, you know, so you'll see me bouncing between the two all the time. Just got a little click on pin 1 there. You saw that there was a little bit of rotation there of my hand, and now just feeling down at the bottom of the back of the lock again. See me pulling something backwards there, so not only am I rotating, but I actually pulled one of those pins backwards towards the front of the lock. I'm honestly not sure which pin that was, probably one of the first 2 or 3, but I don't know for sure. The 2 rear pins, sidebar pins anyway, in this lock, both need to be pushed forwards and raised. So if you saw me pulling something backwards, it was probably one of those front ones. Okay, back up to the top.
Obviously something has dropped and I'm again looking for something, anything to click up there. I don't know what it'll have been that I dropped. I'm going back in with my tippany hook again. I emphasise this, not because it's getting me easier access to pins on bitting, but it just pushes them a little bit differently. You know, you get just slightly different force on it. Alright, back to the sidebar. Gently feeling my way now. I don't think we've got too far to go here actually. I'm not 100% sure on that. And okay, there we go, we're open. So that last pin, that last sidebar slider, I had to either push or pull. I can't quite remember which one. Okay, so what I've done is sped up the rest of the video. I don't think there's really much need for you guys to watch me pulling this thing apart. Like I said, I have got a unedited version of this video up somewhere else just to prove that I have pulled the thing apart properly and it was all pinned up properly and all the rest of it. But I think you can hopefully trust me for the purposes of this video that I didn't do anything sneaky or underhand. So what I hope I've done with this video actually, folks, is made the twin combi a whole lot more accessible for everybody, all pickers of all levels. It is a fantastic lock. It's lovely. I encourage you guys to pick it. It's really good fun. Thanks for watching, guys.